the connection between science, God, and religion. This is lecture 2. If you missed lecture 1, I have a link below. I'll always place links to previous lectures so that everyone can see each lecture that I've done. On today's topic, we'll be talking about time. This will be split into 2 parts. The first will be today's lecture, and the next will be lecture 3. First thing, I just want to start off by apologizing if I'm not making very much eye contact. I do have a lot of things I'd like to cover today, and I did want to do it in a specific order. Some of this could get a little bit complex, so I'm going to be looking down, reading my notes here every now and then, and just want you to know I certainly am having you in my heart here as the audience. I just have some notes that I'll be looking at. So that being said, we can go ahead and move forward to our topic. So in summary, today we'll be clarifying the differences between why science shows the age of the earth to be billions of years old, where based on research, the Bible shows the earth to be thousands of years old. Now, this can be a very complex topic, but I'll break it down as simple as possible so that everyone understands it with examples. We will be looking at how time passing at one point under certain conditions can show to be passing faster or slower than time passing under another point at different conditions, and the scientific examples that prove this as well. So I'd like to start out with the concept of proof. So what exactly is proof? And the word proof as well. So according to dictionary.com, proof is evidence or argument establishing a fact or the truth of a statement. It's important to make a note of the word evidence. Now, this is similar to the word prove, as also defined by dictionary.com as to demonstrate the truth or existence of something by evidence. Again, we have that word evidence, or argument. Now, our goal here today is to demonstrate the truth or existence of how there can be differences in time passage under specific conditions by evidence or argument to establish this as a fact, and how this relates to science, God, and religion, specifically a God, more specifically the Christian God, and the time specified in the Bible on earth versus the time specified in science in the earth. Now, keep in mind, this lecture is the first part of 2 lectures where we'll be talking about time. Now, it's very important for us Christians to know that by current evidence in methods, science shows the earth is older than what the Bible is estimated to be. This is based on looking at various aspects of the Bible. It's estimated the age of the earth from that, based on evidence in the Bible from what the Bible shows, etc. Now, this has been calculated based on current conditions of the universe, and by this evidence, it is reasoned to be true scientifically that the earth is around 4.5 billion years old. Now, keep in mind, we'll be getting into this subject deeply a little bit later. Now, it's important for us Christians to know this has been observed, and not to be hostile towards others when asked the question why science and religion have age discrepancies on this. But I want to assure you by the end of this lecture today, you'll be able to answer that question from both the scientific and religious standpoint. Now, it's important to know the way scientists measure the age of the universe, which the earth, of course, is considered a part of the universe, is assuming that conditions of the universe when it began were the same as conditions currently to make measurements on its age. Now, in a sense, when you look at this, it's a form of faith that current calculations are the same as they were as calculations would be in the early universe. Now, were we alive to see it and measure it back then, 13.8 billion years ago, or the Earth 4.5 billion years ago? Definitely not. No, but based on current evidence, we can get an accurate measurement based on that evidence to estimate the age of the universe and the Earth. So scientists measure the age of the universe in at least two ways. The first is by looking for the oldest stars, and the second is by measuring the rate of expansion of the universe, since what's called the Big Bang, an event that science shows is causing the universe to expand. So basically, like if you're blowing a balloon and it's getting larger and larger, think of the universe as something similar to that. So scientists measuring the rate of the expansion of the universe, like one could measure the rate of expansion of a balloon. It's so similar concept to that. Now there's also something called carbon dating. This is only reasonably reliable for up to about 50,000 years, which is still older than what research shows the Bible says the Earth is. Again, this is just based on analyzing parts of the Bible to estimate what the age of the Earth is based on that information. So this brings us to the 7 days of creation in the Bible versus scientific evidence showing the Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. And additionally, this brings us to the concept of time. So how do we define time? Defining time for now, we're just going to keep it simple and say it's what the clock says, what the clock shows. That will be the simplest way. This will still be enough to show how time, it's important to know as we measure it. Well, that's one thing I do want to clarify when I mention time here is time as we measure it can change in certain conditions. So now that we've defined time, we can use examples of it and show that time, again, as we measure it, can change under certain conditions. So to start off, I'd like to mention Albert Einstein. I'm sure everyone has heard of him, and I won't go into specific details regarding the subject to very fine specific details, but he was a famous scientist born in 1879. He provided the math and science that showed, and it has been proven, that time, again, as we measure it, can change under certain conditions. So we're going to focus on these conditions and later reason by factual evidence how this connects science and religion and God. And to start off, I'd like to mention clock accuracy. Now, some clocks are more accurate than others. In other words, the arrow that moves and ticks slowly becomes less accurate over time. So to give an example of this, let's say you have one clock you set off to go off at 3 p.m. and every day to pick up your kids from school. Well, over time, due to mechanical error, the clock will become less and less accurate. Now, this is not related to Einstein's theory of relativity, but rather mechanical or human error. So just to give an example, let's say that you have this clock to go off at 3 p.m. every day to pick up your children. You pass this on to your grandchildren, it goes to your great-grandchildren, etc. Let's just say 100 years have passed. Well, by that time, there's been a lot of time for the clock to have become less accurate. So by the time, let's say, it gets to your great-grandchildren, then the clock may show to be going off at 2:59 p.m. instead of 3 p.m. if you compare that to a different clock, because over the course of 100 years, the clock has become less accurate. So that's just giving a specific example briefly there. Now, to keep that in mind, there are some clocks known as atomic clocks. These are so accurate that they won't gain or lose a second in 15 billion, that's B as in, with the B as in boy, years. These use atoms to measure the accuracy of the time passage. And basically, just to make sure everyone's familiar with atoms, atoms are basically the building blocks of everything in nature. You have everything in nature from the smallest grain of sand up to the earth itself are built of atoms. So they're like just Legos that everything is made of. Now, we've discussed how time passage can change due strictly to mechanical error. We'll now discuss the science regarding how time passage as we measure it can literally change under certain conditions that are not related to mechanical errors. Now, Albert Einstein predicted that the faster an object travels, the slower time passes when compared to someone else who's just being still. The term when compared to in science terms is referred to relative to. So if we wanted to put this phrase in more of a scientific term, we would say Albert Einstein predicted that the faster an object travels, the slower time passes relative to someone else. So throughout this lecture, I'll be using the phrase relative to. So I just wanted to clarify that so we're all together on the same page with that. You can think of it like this, and this is just a small example. If someone was sitting in a parked car and someone drives past them, the time relative to each other will show to be passing slower in the car that's moving than the car that's parked. Now, the difference at low speed would be so small that it's hard to imagine how small the difference. But there exists scientific equipment so precise that it can measure this small difference. They're very, very, very precise methods that can literally measure details this small. And I promise I'll get back to how this relates to religion a bit later in our lecture. It's important to cover the science aspect so that we can get to that part when we get there. Now, to make it easier to understand, to break this down a little bit further and simpler, let's say the car is still parked and its clock shows 12 p.m. and another car is parked and it also shows 12 p.m. Now, let's say that all of a sudden one car starts to drive so fast that it travels near the speed of light. Now, light is so fast, it's the fastest known speed in the universe that an object can travel, that light travels, the photons of light. It's just to put in perspective how fast it is. Light travels in 1 second 186,000 miles. So just in 1 second, a bit more than 186,000 miles. That's just like, if you want to compare this to something, that's like traveling around the entire world a little bit more than 7 times in 1 second. That's going around the entire Earth more than 7 times in 1 second. So that just puts in perspective how fast the speed of light is. So let's say that the car that moves starts to drive so fast again that it travels near the speed of light and then stops. Now, and again, they both watches said 12 o'clock when these events took place. Now, when the cars compare watches, the car that was parked may show 12:04 p.m., that only 4 minutes have passed. But the car that was moving shows 12:01 p.m. relative to each other. There is a difference in time passage. So the person that was parked would say, it's 12:04. Person that was moving near the speed of light says, no, it's 12:01. What are you mentioning? So this may be hard to imagine, but it happens. It has been measured. And in the same way, when it comes to gravity, the closer an object is to a strong gravity force, the slower time passes than an object that is farther away, again, relative to each other. Now, to give an example of this, let's say if one clock was placed on the ground and another exactly same clock with the same time, again, let's just say they're same brands, 12 o'clock when they start, was placed in a hot air balloon that was not moving. Let's just say it's directly above the other clock. On the ground, the clock would be showing to be passing slower than the time higher up in the balloon. This time difference, again, will be relative to each other. And again, this would be so small that it's hard to even imagine how small the difference would be. But, it would exist. And these are principles in what's referred to as Einstein's theory of relativity. I tried not to get too detailed in it, but enough where the idea is still understood. And again, this is hard to imagine, but this has been proven correctly by clocks that are so accurate, in devices that are so accurate that they can literally show a time difference on Earth of 1 stair step that's below 1 stair step that's above. So just in other words, when you're going upstairs, you have step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. You're progressing 1 step at a time. Well, there's devices that are so accurate they can literally show that time passing at 1 step that's directly below another step is passing slower on this bottom step than the step that's on top, the top step. So show time passing slower here and time is passing faster here relative to each other. They're devices that are that sensitive that can measure the time passage. So again, this is something that's been observed and measured. Now, there are objects in the universe called black holes that have a gravity pull so strong that light is not even enough. The speed of light is not enough to escape the pull once at a certain distance. So again, something traveling so fast in 1 second, it can go around the entire Earth a little bit more than 7 times. Imagine something traveling at that speed and still going at that speed, not being able or not being enough to escape the pull of this black hole. And a black hole, just to for everyone that may not be aware, if you haven't heard of a black hole is basically like just how there's stars and planets and moons, etc. A black hole is basically, you can think of it like a star, but instead of a star that that brings out light, that emits light, it is just a kind of like a star that's just black. It does not emit any kind of light. It absorbs light, and you can't, by definition, you technically are not able to see the black hole. You're just able to see objects around it that are getting pulled into it. So it literally, by the name, just looks like a black hole in the sky. So again, light's not even able to escape from it once at a certain distance traveling at that speed. So that just puts in perspective the strong gravitational force in here. So how does this relate to previous examples we want to ask? So now to get a more detailed answer, let's say that you have a man and woman on planet Earth. Again, let's say they both have watches that say 12 p.m. on their wrists, and they're both on planet Earth. Let's say the man says to the woman, let's meet back on Earth 7 years from now. You go to one place in the universe, and I'll stay on Earth. And so they agree to that. And the man says, after 7 years have passed, I'm going to press this button here, and then we'll, instantaneously be back together. So they agree on that. So let's say the man stays on Earth. The woman goes somewhere else in the universe that's close to a black hole. That's very close, but not close enough to actually be pulled into the black hole. Well, let's say 7 years have passed on Earth. So the man decides, okay, let's push the button so that we can, instantly be back warped together. Pushes the button, they're brought back together. The woman may say, why did you push the button so fast? Only 1 minute has passed. And then the man would be so confused, saying, what do you mean? 7 years have passed. So here we have this phenomenon again where time has literally, relative to each other, passed slower at one point, the woman that's near the black hole, than time at another point, the man that's on Earth. And gravitational forces are so strong near black holes that this is something, at a specific distance, this is something that's a reasonable example to show this. So basically the man would have aged 7 years. The woman would have only aged 1 minute. And to her, it would have felt like only 1 minute had passed, where the man, it felt like 7 years had passed. So it's like within one universe, 2 different time passages have occurred, which appears to be a not possible experience. I mean, we're talking about the same universe here. And again, there's scientific equipment that's precise enough to measure these very small differences. So this would be, in this case, because the force is so strong, this would be a large difference. So I've done some personal research on time. I won't go into the details, but for now, we'll look at time from this standard method. So now we can get back to the details of the 7 days of creation, the age scientific evidence shows the Earth to be, and the age the Earth appears to be relative to the Bible. Now, we've shown that time passage at one place in the universe can be different than time passage relative to each other in another. Now, this is factual based on everything that we've discussed previously. So, to get back to a religious emphasis, what I'd like to do to compare this to religion and science and different locations in the universe is I'm going to use another example here. Let's say that you have 3 people that each have $1 in change in a bucket. and these people are at different places in the universe. They're not all at the same place. Now, one person has it in pennies, the other person has it in nickels, and the other person has it in dimes. So let's say the person with pennies asks the two other people with nickels and dimes to pull out 7 coins. So one person, a person with nickels, would have 35 cents, 7 times 5. The other person would have 70 cents, 10 times 7. Now, if the person with pennies were to pull out 7 coins, they would have 7 cents. Now, let's say by definition it's understood that 1 cent represents 1 year, that everyone would agree on that. Everyone, let's say everyone, all these people were from Earth, but they went to different parts of the universe, and it's all understood that 1 cent represents 1 year. So the person with 1 cent and other observers would say that 7 years had passed. But the two people that had 35 cents and 70 cents would say, no, 35 years and 70 years have passed. So who's right here? The question when you ask that. And the answer is everyone's right. Actually, the one constant in all of this is that you have one hand here, pulled out 1 coin 7 times, regardless of what, that's the one constant you had. So this does not depend on how much each coin is measured to be, but it is rather the number of times the hand has pulled out a coin. So God, or the creator of the universe, is not simply limited to 1 bucket. God, the creator of the universe, can draw from 1 bucket at any point in the universe 2 times, another 4 times, and another 1 time. It makes no difference in the sense that any bucket can be equal to a number of 1. So if God draws from any bucket 7 times, everything is absolute to him and not relative. But to observers, it would appear to be relative. And we'll discuss some more details in this regarding this in my next lecture. So just to reiterate that phrase here, get to more details. So if God pulls out 7 coins, he would be at any point in the universe at once. And we're remembering that we're talking about intelligent design, this being a creator, a God of the universe. So a creator would be at any point in the universe, the one that's designing the universe. So again, to God, time would be absolute, and his 7 days or 7 times would not be absolute to an observer, but relative to. So to an observer, 1 place in the universe would show relative to their point 1,000 years, another 100,000 years, another 10,000 years. But God is at every point in the universe. So anything that God creates by factual evidence, again, we've determined by factual evidence that time passage changes depending on conditions and places, locations in the universe. But if the universe is all one thing to God, then time would be absolute to the creator of the universe. So anything that God creates by factual evidence can be considered 1 chunk of something, or rather 1. So again, regardless of what an observer may define it as, to God it's 1 chunk of something. So when God created the universe, he created it in 7 chunks, which is defined as the 7 days of creation, which observers would see as so many billions of years relative. So God is defining it days so that we, as people, we can understand that, and it basically in terms that we understand. We understand a day as 24 hours, the earth rotating, taking 24 hours to rotate, taking 24 hours to do that. That's a day. This is defined in a way that we can understand it. And that's why it's referred to the 7 days of creation. But it doesn't mean literally that it was only 7 days that the world was created, that the universe was created, because God, again, is not limited to a specific area, time and space as we think about it. God would be anywhere, and time would not be relative to God, but absolute. He could label anything as one. If 1,000 years had passed, to God, that's like the number one. So 1,000 years may pass from relative time, but to God, that's like one. So when God, again, going back here, so when God created the universe, he created it in 7 chunks, which is defined as the 7 days of creation. Now, the reference in the Bible of there was evening and there was morning the first day or the second day, etc. It's important to understand this is just a reference for us, again, to understand the separation in chunks. It doesn't literally mean it's just one day. As it refers to this, if you read the Bible, the first 2 days of creation, it refers to this before the earth was even formed or formless, as the Bible refers to it. In the very first 2 days of creation, the earth hadn't even been formed. When it says in the beginning that God created the heavens and the earth, it's just letting the reader know that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. After that, it explains the order in which the heavens and the earth were created. And the earth did not start to have form until the 3rd day. So when it says, and there was evening and there was morning the first day, the earth hadn't even been formed by then at that point. It was still void and formless. And the same thing on the 2nd day. So when it says there was evening and there was morning the first day, that's a reference for us to understand in our reference point, our relative time, understand the separation in these chunks. So we think of that as days, and we can comprehend that as that, because that's something relative to how we calculate time, how in 24 hours the world rotates, and that's considered one day. So this solves the discrepancies by factual information of why the Bible shows discrepancies of time in the early universe versus what we perceive as time in the modern universe. And the God that created the universe, this is based on factual evidence. Again, we're talking about time that's relative, based on factual evidence that we've discussed today. So the God that created the universe, based on factual evidence I've examined, I've read the entire Bible from cover to cover. So I definitely understand the scriptures and everything from cover to cover, and that the God that created the universe is the Christian God. And I understand and will cover why there appear to be discrepancies in the Bible itself, its origins in comparison to other scriptures, by this knowledge and discernment of reading the Bible. Reading the entire Bible, I can understand and explain various aspects of scriptures, etc., and questions that people may have, and that's part of my goal in conducting these lectures here. So again, by facts, this combines the 7 days or chunks of creation with scientific observations of time. So God created what we perceive as time, and therefore he's not restricted by it. God can work in absolute time, what he defines as one chunk of something, or as relative time, what we might define as 1,000 years, 100 years, etc. So just as an example, this just like if someone created a convenience store and sold food, they can work inside and outside the rules if they choose. If they want anything in the store for free, they don't have to pay for it, or can pay any price that they define as for it. We can think of this as like absolute time being. Or if they want to sell it to themselves at the store's price within the rules that other observers see, they can sell it or they can buy it just like other customers can at the same price. This would be relative time. So again, just reemphasizing this, how God can work in relative time as well. It's just like God told Noah it would rain for 40 days and 40 nights. This was God working in relative time. This is time relative to Noah, a day being 24 hours. So God's saying it's going to rain for 40 days and 40 nights. This is relative to Noah's idea of time as what a day is. So 40 days and 40 nights. In a sense, if we're looking at like creation, etc., then it would look like it rained for more than the time it took to create the heavens and the earth. If the heavens and earth were created in 7 days, then you were looking at this literal, then it would be observed as if it rained longer than it took to create the earth and the heavens. So this 40 days and 40 nights is showing us that God's working in relative time. He can work in absolute time that he defines as a chunk or chunks of something, and then in relative time, how observers may perceive time. So that being said, I want to go to a scripture that I saw. This is something that's something that was very powerful to me, and I wasn't looking for this. I just happened to be going through my Bible. I was thinking about when I was thinking about doing lectures, I wasn't aware of everything I wanted to discuss as far as the order or what to say yet, but I knew in my mind what it was I wanted to say, but it was just a matter of how I was going to break it down to others. And so I was just going through the Bible, looking through scriptures, I was searching for something in the Bible, and I just happened to, I wasn't looking for this or anything, I just happened to look down right at a scripture that emphasized what I wanted to portray to my audience, to those seeking information and wisdom, understanding, discernment between the connection of science and God and religion. And I know this is God wanting me to tell you this today regarding our lecture, and emphasize to each other how God's time is not always absolute, is not equal to our time. Now, this scripture that I read is from the Bible. It is the book of Peter. It's Peter chapter 3, verses 8 through 9. And it reads, "But do not forget this one thing, dear friends. With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day." And when I read that, I was like, wow, that's exactly what I wanted to show. And that's just chilling, because that goes back to the 7 days of creation. When God created the heavens and the earth was created in 7 days, again, what God labels as days doesn't mean it's literally one day of something. God can label a day however he wants to, one day being a chunk of something. So in this case here, if under this scripture it says, with the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day, then when God created something on the first day, then that could be like 1,000 years in relative terms. So one day being 1,000 years, or 10,000 years, 100,000 years, millions of years, a billion years. It's to God, it's how God labels time, not how we see it as relative, but to God, time is absolute. So the 7 days of creation are not referring to a literal 7 days, but rather the 7 chunks of God's creation. And again, and there was evening and there was morning, the first day and the second day, and then the other days as well, is a reference just for us to understand in our relative times how we think of day and night, the separation in these chunks. So that's something I just thought that was a really powerful scripture, and I wanted to be able to share that with you today. So that again, it's just chilling when you think about that, because that emphasizes everything that we've discussed. So that being said, today I certainly hope that you've enjoyed the lecture, and I did my best to make sure that everybody understood it. I always want you to feel free to leave feedback or questions if you have any to me in the comments section. I'll get to that in just a moment. because I want to make sure that everybody understands this is my audience is for everybody, not for just people in a particular college or university or wherever. My audience, I want to be wherever you are, from wherever you are, whether it's I'm in the United States of America in Texas, or whether you're in Brazil or wherever you're from. This is for everybody. So I just, first of all, just want to thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you on my next lecture, where we will continue discussing further details about time, and also answer the question, who created God? If you want to subscribe, that's fine. My biggest focus is just maintaining you as my audience. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comments section. I'll try to have another video out no more than 2 weeks from now. I would love, my goal, I would love to have a video out every week. I just don't quite know if that's something that I'll, be able to do for sure. So, if I can, I'd like to have a video out each week, but definitely within 2 weeks, you should see my videos up, and I'd love to have you again, so we can discuss further things. So again, I'll try to have my video out again no more. You should expect to see my next video no more than 2 weeks from today. So I've included some links below for a couple things, and then also my email address if you're interested or would like to contact me directly. Feel free to do so. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have, or inform me if it's something we may be covering, etc. You can ask me anything you'd like to. So that being said, I look forward to seeing you again next time. And as always, I just like to know, no matter what anyone says to you, just always like to say, what anyone says, no matter what anyone says to you, you're always worthy of love. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. So it's important for all of us to hear that and know that. I know we all come from different backgrounds, different families, different things, but that is something that is true. So just keep that in your heart. And again, don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Okay, and so I send a warm heart to you, and I hope to see you next week. And I hope that you have a great week. Goodbye for now. Smiles.